University of Alabama has been a very special place to Terry and me. We have enjoyed every minute of our 17 years being the head coach at Alabama, as well as becoming a part of the Tuscaloosa community. It's not just about how many games we won and lost, but it's about the legacy and how we went about it. We also tried to do it the right way. The goal was always to help players create more value for their future, be the best player they could be, and be more successful in life because they were part of the program. Hopefully, we've done that. And we will always consider Alabama our home. Now, Paul, obviously, you've been very plugged into Saban over the years. What's your reaction to Nick retiring and now?
Unlike what I said a minute ago about Bill Belichick, I think he's doing it perfectly. Yeah, some would argue, wouldn't it have been more majestic, more Shakespearean if he went out after winning a national championship? Not really. He had an amazing season this year, as we have documented here, Molly and Stephen A. And he did more with this team. This is a team that could have lost 4 or 5 times. He had a quarterback that was not perfect. He wasn't Bryce Young. He wasn't Tua. He wasn't Jalen Hurts, and he certainly wasn't even Mac Jones on this day that New England makes a change. But he got through it, and he beat Georgia. And what he did in beating Georgia is significant. He ended Kirby Smart's run at a three-peat, something that even Nick Saban couldn't do and nearly did. Don't forget, 10 years ago, Saban was attempting a field goal at Auburn to win that game, go to the SEC championship, and probably win another one. And the field goal was short, and Chris Davis ran it back 109 yards in the kick six, and one of the greatest upsets of all time. But this year, he was able to stop Kirby Smart. And I think once he did that, I really believe he started thinking, what else do I have to prove? Everyone knows who I am. I know who I am. I've left this legacy. Do I want to keep gambling on it? And on top of all that, Stephen A., you know better than almost anybody how much he hated NIL. I'll tell you a quick story. He called me about 1.5 years ago and just raged about NIL. And I frankly didn't agree with him. He hung up the phone and he called Stephen A. Smith. I had a friend that was in his office the next day, and he said, you know, Finebaum didn't agree with me, but Stephen A. Smith does. And the next week he went public with the Jimbo Fisher situation, and everyone knows what happened after that.
You know, it's interesting. Like I said, I heard the news yesterday, and I was shocked because I was debating with you about a week ago that I didn't believe that he would walk away. And, you know, it stemmed from my conversation with him. And I tell people, you know, I'm not going to lie about it. I just can't help the way that I am. I'm just not moved by much. I really am not. I'm just not moved by much. And I got to tell you, you know, one of the greatest moments that I've had was sitting in his office for an hour talking to him one-on-one, even though my brother-in-law was sitting in the office just listening, but just talking with him that whole time and just talking to him about life and what winning is all about and how once you win, how do you keep, you know, what are you doing? It's about you got to do it again, and you got to do it again, and you got to do it again. You got to get up every morning. And you got to be ready to roll, and because nobody's going to stop coming at you. And he had that fire in his belly, and he said it. It's not going away. It's not going anywhere. And when I saw Alabama lose to Michigan last week in the college football national semifinal in the playoffs, I just said to myself, you know what, it's unfinished business because 3 minutes left in the game, you know, they're in the lead. They're en route to playing for the national championship, and you could not tell me that they would not have beaten Washington. I believe they would have beaten Washington. So that's just how I felt about it. And then for him to walk away from it all right now, it was shocking, but when I think about it, you know what? He's doing it on his terms. This is what he's doing, and this is what we all dream about doing. I look at his resume right here, 17 seasons, 6 national titles, 9 SEC championships, a 201-29 overall record, 10 or more wins in 16 straight seasons, 117-18 in the best conference in college football over the 17 years. 117-18. I mean, that's just unbelievable. 13-4 in bowl games. The man is phenomenal. And I think that a legitimate argument could be made that the person that has announced his retirement is the greatest coach ever. He's in the discussion. It's a conversation as to whether or not on any level, college or pro, Nick Saban could potentially be considered the greatest coach who's ever lived. because of all the changes and all the things that have happened. And the last point that I make, you are absolutely right. The NIL, it was grating his nerves, and I had a conversation, and he was on fire about it. You're absolutely right. And his whole thing was, it wasn't necessarily about the NIL itself, Paul. It was about the fact that the agents and how the agents were utilizing it. He used words like embezzlement. He used words like hostage. He used these words to describe the climate that NIL had created, not because of the kids, because he wanted the kids to get paid, to get compensated, but the adults in the room, purportedly there on behalf of the kids and what they had turned it into. It was the one thing that grated his nerves. It wasn't the transfer portal. It was NIL. That was what drove him nuts.
And Stephen A., there's a point of reference to that phone call he made to you that day and why he went public. And some of his issues were about a single player. At the end of the 22 season, Alabama missed the playoff because they lost a game on the final play against Tennessee. Remember that field goal? And they lost in overtime on a two-point conversion to LSU. There was a wide receiver. He was the best wide receiver in the country, and he went somewhere else, and he could have gone to Alabama, but Saban would not pay this young man because he said, if I do that, and we're talking millions of dollars here, then how am I going to coach him, and how am I going to be able to look myself in the mirror? He let him go. He was angry about the situation. Had he got that guy, and he could have easily gotten him within whatever rules there are in college football nowadays, he would have probably won the national championship last year, and those kind of episodes really grated on him to have to go out there and literally pay millions of dollars for someone and then try to coach that person.
When he called Paul and then he called me, he was venting, but it wasn't until after the call he decided to go public. Because he was like going back and forth.
No, it's interesting. But Stephen A., do you have some level of a deeper respect for him, that he's old school in that sense and he didn't want to buy in and pay the players the new wave?
Listen, I do. Again, it wasn't about paying them. It was about compensating them exponentially more than the other players on his squad. That was what, it's like if you're compensating the players, that's one thing. But if one player is getting $100,000 and another player is getting $5 million, that's the discrepancy that was of major concern of him. I don't want to speak for him, but that's what came across to me. But I've always been an admirer of him, old school. I revere the man because, to me, the kind of things that Nick Saban taught and continues to teach are the kind of things that prepare you for life as an adult man in this world. And that's why my admiration for him knows no limits. And he knows that because we've talked enough about that. He knows how I feel about it.
It's understandable. How do you keep the equality between the team? Paul, I want to ask you this. What does Alabama do next?
Well, I think the one thing we don't know, Molly, is how long the athletic director there has been aware of this. My sense is he had a hint because, as I let you know, Stephen A., privately, I felt like this was the year, but then there were distinctions and distractions. Every time I saw him this year, there was just a look in his eye that he was closer to the end, and I don't think he wanted to come back and have people say, well, this is obviously his last year. Just exactly what Belichick has gone through this season as soon as he started losing. Nick Saban was not concerned about losing, but it was going to be more difficult next year. So back to the question. I think they are looking very seriously at a couple of people. Dan Lanning is probably at the top of the list. Dan Lanning, a couple of years ago at the draft, Stephen A., I saw you out in Vegas. I saw Dan Lanning the day of the draft, and he played he's the Oregon coach. He played a voicemail for me from 2015. He said, I want you to hear this. He goes, this is Nick Saban calling me, offering me a graduate assistant's job. He keeps it in his phone, and it would cost $20 million, which isn't a big deal, but I think he's the kind of coach Alabama is probably going to look at. I think Sarkisian is on that list for the obvious reasons. I don't think they'll go NFL, and I don't think he'll take it. But DeMeco Ryans was an All-American at Alabama. He's beloved by that school, and it would be a very unique hire, but I think that would be complicated because I think they want a coach by the end of this week, and that's not going to happen with DeMeco Ryans.
Paul, I've got to let you go here now, but Stephen A., it's very interesting. I never would have predicted, as you described them, two best friends, two legends, two of the best at what they do, embarking on a new chapter on the very same day.
Give me something.